Oh, wow. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, here's another one. This is going to be another crazy one. So Supreme Court, y'all heard this before. Supreme Court had cleared ways for Trump to cut budget, to start laying off massive people, right? So let me get into the story real quick. So Supreme Court clears the ways for Trump to cut education department. See, other video I talked about, he was cutting. The Supreme Court was able to get the decision through where Donald Trump was able to start doing these massive layoffs where hundreds of thousands of people was going to be laid off. Now, recently, the Supreme Court just cleared the way for Trump to cut the education department because that was put on freeze, on hold, because people was basically suing him, saying, hey, you can't do this stuff. He was trying to do some executive order. They was like, hey, nope, this cannot be going on. The emergency application to the justices stems from efforts by Trump administration to sharply curb the federal government rules in the nation's schools. So the move by Trump was to, okay, let's start cutting the education department from the federal level, from the upper level, and basically start leaving the education department basically smaller. So it's going to be run by the state. It's not going to be the federal government. Is not going to be all over education. So the move by the justices represent an expansion of executive power, allowing President Trump to dismantle the inner working of the government department, including the education department. So what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Ainsley D, I'm back with another video. Now, this article is coming from the New York Times, and shout outs to Abby Van Sickle for reporting from Washington. So shout out to her for this report. So I'm going to go over some of this report and make some comments on it. So the Supreme Court agreed on Monday that the Trump administration can proceed with dismantling the education department by hiring, no, excuse me, not hiring. We're not hiring here. By firing more than 1,000 workers from the education department. Wow, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be crazy for the next upcoming years. More than 1,000 people is going to be fired from the education department, Department of Education. The order is significant victory for the administration and could ease President Trump's effort to sharply curb the federal government rule into the nation's school. So the federal government don't want that much more regulations of the public school system. So they want to curl the federal government role in the nation's school. So cut back on the federal involvement. So the Trump administration has announced plans to fire more than 1,300 workers, a move that would effectively cut the department which manages federal funding for colleges, so federal loan for colleges, tracking student achievement, and enforcing the civil rights laws in school. So let's see. So they're going to be firing people who are in these departments. So I think for loans, I think they wanted to go to the Treasury. So for federal student loans, I believe that instead of having it going through the Department of Education, they're going to be moving into the Department of Treasury. So the Department of Treasury will be handling that part. What else we got going on? They're going to be tracking students' achievement and enforcing civil rights laws. So basically, all those civil rights laws and stuff that was implemented in these schools, it looked like it's going to be on the back burner. So it's not going to be how it was like a couple decades ago. So the education department began the year with more than 4,000 employees. Did y'all hear that? They begun the year with more than 4,000 employees. The administration also fired some probationary workers and offered employees the ability to resign. So they probably did a buyout. You know, you resign, to give you with a severance package or something like that. Altogether, after the termination, the education department will have a workforce of about the size it did before Trump returned to office. So basically, it's going to be going down to about 2,000. So the move by the justices in the Supreme Court represents an expansion of presidential power, allowing Mr. Trump to dismantle the inner working of a government department created by the Congress without legislature's input. So it's a government department created by the Congress, but his executive order is allowing him to dismantle the department without legislature input. Wow. So basically, when they formed this wasn't in the amendments or anything like that. in order to, if they want to dismantle the education department, it will have to go through Congress. But that wasn't the case. In this case, you can just have an executive order being able to dismantle the Department of Education. I don't think that they're getting rid of the whole department. Like I said, they're just reducing the size from 4,000 to 2,000. So just reducing the department role on education as a nation, as a whole. They want to put more of the education, I believe, on the states instead of having the federal government be in control of that. So it comes after decision by the justice, like I said last week, clear the way for Trump administration to move forward with cutting thousands of jobs across a number of federal agencies, including the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Wow. And the state treasury. Oh, I got to look into that. So the Department of Housing and Urban Development is going to be losing employees, as well as the state treasury. And I was just talking about the state treasury because I think that the Department of Education, the loans for colleges, the federal loans for colleges, I believe, will be going through the treasury. But I'm not sure now if they're cutting people from the treasury. So the move by the justice, wow. So the firing of these people will hobble much of the department's work. Supporters arguing in court filing. Particularly hard hit will be the Department of Office for Civil Rights, which had 7 of its 12 offices shut down. Wow. It's a lot going on. So the order by the court was unsigned and gave no reasoning, as is typical in such an emergency application. No vote count was given, which is usual for emergency orders. But Justice Sonia Sotomayor wrote a dissent joined by the court's others 2 liberal justices, Elena Kagan and Katana Brown Jackson. So the 3 argued that Trump had overstepped his authority with his unilateral efforts to eliminate a cabinet-level agency established by Congress nearly a half a century ago. Only Congress has the power to abolish the Department. Justice Sotomayor wrote in her 19-page dissent. So only 2 people basically said that he didn't have the power to do this. The court decision she wrote would have severe consequences for the country's students by unleashing untold harm, delaying or denying educational opportunities, and leaving students to suffer from discrimination, sexual assault, and other civil rights violations without the federal resources Congress intended. The order to technically temporary in effect only while courts continue to consider the legalities of Trump's move. In practice, fired workers whom Boston judge had ordered be reinstated are now again subject to job removal. So he had basically fired some people from from the Department of Education, and some of them were laid off, but a judge in Boston was able to reverse it, got those people back their jobs. But now with the Supreme Court now on the other hand is saying, nope, he has the power to do this, he has the executive order to do this. So now those people are faced with the problem of losing their jobs again. They was gonna get removed from their job. A judge put a stop on that, so they was able to keep their job. But now with the Supreme Court is saying that, okay, he has the power to do this. Now they're at the verge of being removed from their jobs again. So Trump administration officials celebrated the court decision, with Mr. Trump himself thanking the court on social media for a major victory to parents and students across the country. Wow. A White House spokeswoman, Liz Houston, said a statement that the court had once again recognized that radical district court judges refuses to accept President Trump as the head of the executive branch has absolute constitutional authority to direct and manage its agencies and officers. So basically they're saying even though the Congress was able to create these departments, Congress is the one that put these departments together, the Department of Education, the president has the power to dismantle and do what he has to do with these departments as an executive, basically from the head of the executive branch. So the Education Secretary, Linda McMahon, said in a statement that the department would press forward with terminating workers. And it's crazy, like you have the head of the department is saying, okay, well, we're going to be getting rid of people. Instead of trying to build up the department, they're going to be reducing the size of the department. We will carry out the reduction, enforcing Wow, hold on. We will carry out the reduction in force to promote efficiency and accountability and to ensure resources are directed where they matter most, to students, parents, teachers. Ms. McCain said that the other day. She added that the administration would return education to the states. That's what I was saying earlier. They want the education to go to the states, but would continue to perform all statutory duties while reducing education bureaucracy. Democrats and union representing education department workers warned of dire consequences. Well, sorry, not dire consequences, dire consequences, because this is going to be at dire consequences. We don't know exactly how this is going to turn out. Maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. We never know. The effort of Trump, I don't know, it might be a bad thing. Ooh, it's a lot of people involved in education. Hope these states got the money, man, because I know even for my state, I believe they're going to be losing out on, I think, almost $30 million in federal funding from the Fed. So let's see what happens. The effort from Trump administration to dismantle the Department of Education is playing with the futures of millions of Americans in under just 4 months. And after just 4 months, the consequences are already evident across our education system. Sherry Smith, the president of the American Federation of Government Employees Local 252, said, American Federation of Government Employees. Oh, so they have a union. That's how the court case came up. They have a union, and that union basically say, hey, let's take it to the Supreme Court, but it didn't work out, unfortunately. Senator Chuck Schumer of New York, the minority leader, said on social media, this isn't streamlining, this is sabotage. It's sabotage, and it's Americans' kids paying the price. Mr. Trump had signed an executive order on March 20th. So on March 20th, President Trump instructed Linda McMahon to start shutting down the federal agency which manages federal loans for colleges, monitors student achievement, and support programs for students with disability. Trump administration officials cited low test scores by students as reason for dismantling the department. We're going to shut it down as quickly as possible, Mr. Trump said during the ceremony where he signed the executive order. So basically, they just want all this to go back on the states. Really don't want much to do with it, and unfortunately a lot of these programs is getting dismantled, but hopefully it's going to be back on the states, and these states can pick up these programs such as the program for disabilities and monitor students' achievement. So the move immediately set up legal fight over the future of the department because it was created by an act of Congress and legislature had not given approval to eliminate it. Shortly after, 2 school districts, the American Federation teacher and 21 Democratic state attorney general, filed a legal challenge in federal court in Massachusetts. The challengers asked a judge to block the executive order and to unwind a round of layoffs that gutted the department workforce by about half. Lawyers for the challengers argue that the administration plans would interfere with the department's ability to carry out functions required by law. There was so much going on with this case back and forth. You don't even know. Like, you have some justices supporting it, you have some not. Then you have some district justices supporting it, and basically like bringing not a civil lawsuit, but bringing it to court. May 22nd, Judge Mayan J. Juan of the U.S. District Court of the District of Massachusetts ordered Trump administration to reinstate the fired employees while the lawsuit was pending. Good move by that judge. Judge Juan, who was nominated to the bench by President Joseph R. Biden Jr., said he agreed with only Congress could eliminate the department, and the administration action amounted to an illegal shutdown of the agency. I mean, that's good that he was backing Joe Biden's, and he was promoted by Joe Biden, but unfortunately, it was only a U.S. District Court. It wasn't a Supreme Court. All right. So then after that, now on June 4th, a panel of judges in the Court of Appeal for the First Circuit upheld Judge Juan's ruling. Okay. 2 days later, the Trump administration filed an emergency application with the Supreme Court, asking it to intervene and lift the trial judge's order. Wow, so they was battling it out in these courts. It went from district to circuit Supreme to Supreme Court. I don't even know if I'm saying the right thing, but But Solicitor General D. John Sewer argued that Judge Wan had thwarted the executive branch's authority to manage the Department of Education. In response, lawyers from the challengers argued that the agency's leaders had set out to destroy the agencies by executive fate, and without the support of Congress. So in court filing, the challengers asserted that the trial judge had properly determined that the government was likely to lose its argument that it had no eliminate. Okay, in the court filing, the challengers asserted that the trial judge had properly determined that the government was likely to lose its argument that it had not eliminated the department. Judge Wan properly recognized that just because skeleton crew remains at the education department, that it did not mean that Trump administration was faithfully carrying out Congress' mission in what was effectively tearing the department down to the plywood, they argued. The Trump administration replied in court filing that the department had determined that it can carry out its statutorily mandated functions with pared down staff, that many discretionary functions are better left to the states. And that's what it all comes down to. They want the education mostly to be left out to the state. They'll take care of the majority part at the top level, but really and truly, they just want most of it left down to the state. So there it is, ladies and gentlemen. The ruling has came through. The Supreme Court clears the way for Trump cuts in the education department. Hope you got some value out of this. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I'll talk to you next time. Peace.